afternoon, good morning, good evening, everybody. It is Saturday, August 16th, and you know what that means. It's time for the High Risk Wrestling Podcast. I am your host, knowing when to pull that trigger, pivot, make that special move. It is I, Jeremy Pierce. Check out the socials, Charismatic Creations on Facebook and YouTube, Charismatic_Creations52 on Instagram, and of course, the 215 on Twitter. Without further ado, today's show is about when to pivot, when to pull that trigger. There have been times in professional wrestling where there was an obvious move to make when the fans were behind someone and they didn't. The company didn't move, they didn't pivot, they didn't pull the trigger, and there were times that they did. So that's what today's show was all about. But we'll be right back. Hit my music. This list is very, very simple. These are the next big thing. We start with number 5, Stephanie Vaquer. Yeah, even though Julia came in first and got all the hype, Stephanie has been the one to really move up the card. And even though Julia is currently a champion of the main roster, Stephanie Vaquer is the one that they might see a brighter future in. She's being pushed. She is super over. And part of that has to do with Booker T. Stephanie Vaquer is the next big thing. Number 4, Mike Santana. We're going to talk a little bit more about Mike Santana later on the show, but this guy, after Joe Hendry leaves, is obviously going to be the future face of TNA. He left AEW betting on himself, and is absolutely working out. Number 3, Ilya Dragunov. The Mad Dragon is a force of nature. He's a man not to be messed with. Doesn't care who you are. He doesn't care how big you are. He will challenge you. Seeing how's he come against Braun Breaker, how's he going against Gunther, and it's just worked out in his favor. Number 2, Chris Statlander. If you know who number 2 is, then you know who number 1 is. But Chris Statlander is one of the women in AEW who just has it. She can do funny. She can do serious. She has the strength, the look, the speed. She is more than a woman. She is. She's an AEW original, and she's going to be climbing to the top of that mountain sooner rather than later. Number 1, Willow Nightingale. She might be the most over woman in all of professional wrestling, next to Toni Storm and Rhea Ripley. Willow Nightingale has it. She has the audience in the palm of her hand. When her music hits, listen to the pop. We are all waiting. We are all clamoring for Willow to finally win the big one. We'll be right back. The spotlight is on, and it's shining on. Let's go, Max. You're the best wrestler alive. Let's go, Max. You're the best wrestler alive. Max Caster. This new gimmick that he's been doing, trademarking and becoming the quote-unquote best wrestler alive, has been a thing of beauty for him. It's been twofold. It's kept him on TV, but it's also kept people that have been in storylines in people's faces, in the forefront, in their minds. And now we're starting to see the fruits of this gimmick with the double turn. Remember, it started with him turning on Anthony Bowens, but now we're starting to see Max get cheered, get over, and persevere, and Anthony lose it. And who will Billy Gunn choose? I think this will ultimately culminate in the Acclaim reforming sometime down the line, but it won't be soon. But we're going to do this double turn, and it's working. Max is all in on this gimmick. He is funny. He is getting over more and more each and every week, and now his chant is over. It's over with the crowd. So one more time for me, everybody. Let's go, Max. You're the best wrestler alive. Let's go, Max. You're the best wrestler alive. We shall be right back with the top story. All right. I will not be before you very long today. Today's show, when to pivot, when to pull the trigger. What does that mean? Well, there are times in pro wrestling where there's a spark, right? Something happens and a person or a chance or a group are slowly but surely getting over. And even though it's not a part of your story, right? You kind of have to acknowledge it. You kind of have to really lean into it and go with the hot hand. So that's what we mean when we say pivot, when we say you pull the trigger. Somebody just gets over and you just got to give into them. So that's what today's show is about. We're going to look at the failures, and there are many. We're going to focus a lot of it on the WWE because they've been around the longest. We're going to try to focus on recent ones so everybody can really remember. But we're going to focus on some other companies, and we're also going to look at the successes and then see where we go from here. So let's start with the failures, and there are a few for the WWE. We're going to start off with Santino Marella twice. So what do you mean twice? So Santino Marella has been a popular wrestler now in TNA, but he has really been a strong comedy character, and the fans have always been behind him. So what do you mean twice? So we start with, so in back-to-back years, Santino was just over. So in 2011, we had the biggest Royal Rumble. It was the first time they did the 40-man Royal Rumble. And it was an interesting affair, but something happened. So we get down to the final two. It was Del Rio and I think Rusev, and clearly we're going for a Del Rio win here, right? Del Rio eliminates the person and we think he's won, but in pops Santino, and everybody remembers, well, wait a minute, Santino never went over the top rope. And he gets back in the ring and the crowd loses it, right? Goes for the Cobra, and the WWE stick with the plan. Del Rio tosses him out, which I get. You're not going to have Santino Marella win the Royal Rumble. I get that. The following year in 2012, there was the Elimination Chamber. Randy Orton was hurt, and Santino won a battle royal to replace him. So at this chamber, this was the SmackDown chamber, and Bryan Danielson was the world champion at the time. He was the world heavyweight champion. He was the world heavyweight champion. And this chamber featured the Great Khali, Big Show, Cody Rhodes, Wade Barrett, Santino, and Daniel Bryan. So obviously, Daniel Bryan was probably going to win, right? And you could have maybe gone with Big Show. They didn't really see anything in Cody. Whereas this one didn't really have any star power. But if you could look at the WWE chamber, Truth, totally don't remember that. Dolph Ziggler, Kofi, Jericho, Miz, and CM Punk. But back to Daniel Bryan. So people are getting eliminated, right? Khali gets eliminated, then Big Show, then Cody, then Wade Barrett. So it's down to Daniel Bryan and Santino. But Santino is super over. Listen to the pop. The two pops that Santino got, the one for the Rumble and the one for the Chamber, are second to none. And I might have pivoted here. I might have pivoted and just had Santino win the title. He could have lost the title on SmackDown the same week. So, okay. I get it. You're not going to. I understand WWE. The next ones are just really, really egregious. Bray Wyatt, just losing every single feud and not going over. He would be hot in the beginning, and he would win the mini feuds, but not the big feuds. He lost to Bray. He lost to Roman. He lost to The Undertaker. He lost to John Cena. And it's like they would not pull the trigger on him. He should have beaten Taker. He should have beaten Cena. And a lot of these matches were all at WrestleMania. Bray could have ended Taker's streak. That would have been tremendous for his career. They finally pulled the trigger when he won the Chamber and defended the championship on the following SmackDown. A fantastic match, but ultimately lost it to Randy Orton at WrestleMania, which made no sense. And that match should have been a triple threat match. It should have been Bray, Randy, and Luke Harper. Then there's Booker T. So yes, they pulled the trigger on Booker T with the King Booker gimmick, but Lord, you know what I'm going to talk about, everybody, and we're going to keep this short. WrestleMania 19, the racist feud against Triple H, and he doesn't win the World Heavyweight Championship. That feud was steeped in racism. It was steeped in hate, and yet, they wouldn't pull the trigger. When you do egregious things like that feud and the hate that it embodied, you make sure that the good guy comes out in the end. And the good guy did not come out then. The WWE was just one of the worst things they have ever done in the history of that company. Rusev. I'm not even gonna go to him losing to John Cena at WrestleMania. I'm going to more specifically point to Rusev Day. Rusev Day was over like Rover. Oh my goodness. And they didn't pull the trigger. He didn't win a tag title with Aiden English. He didn't win a mid-card championship. Rusev Day was over. And you compare that to him being the Redeemer in AEW. Yes, it didn't end well, but they pulled the trigger on the Redeemer gimmick and it worked. So Rusev Day, they didn't pull the trigger because, well, they didn't come up with it. And Vince McMahon told Rusev to his face, they're not cheering for you, they're laughing at you. That was just dumb. Asuka is one of the most important and greatest women in the history of professional wrestling. She's done everything in the WWE. But you know what I'm going to point to. You know what I'm going to point to. Asuka losing to Charlotte Flair at WrestleMania, ending Asuka's streak. It just didn't make sense. I'm not going to put all the blame on Charlotte, but there are times you have to stand up to the boss and say, hey, this isn't right. And you have the perfect story built in that, okay, let's say you have Asuka lose. It's about the recovery. The following year, we had the women's main event at WrestleMania. And instead of it being Becky versus Ronda, it ended up being Becky, Ronda, and Charlotte. But how did Charlotte get into that match? They had Charlotte beat Asuka for the women's championship to get into the match. That didn't make any sense. Asuka could have got her win back versus Charlotte at WrestleMania. The WWE have failed Asuka many times. Jakara Jackson and Lash Legend. It felt like up until Jakara's release that they were it. They were the next woman up to be tag team champions, right? For the longest of times, there were only a few true women's tag teams. You had Katana and Kaden, right? You had Isla and Alba. You had, I think there was one more team. You had The Way. And you had Jakara and Lash. And they just felt like the team. They should have been champion. And so, for some idiotic, dumbass reason, the WWE never pulled the trigger on them. After they unified the NXT and the WWE Women's Tag Team Championship, they never came back to NXT, those titles. And they haven't been in NXT since. No NXT team has held the championship since the unification match. That doesn't make sense, and it should have been Jakara and Lash. Obviously, we have to mention the Nexus, and this is all on John Cena. Because John Cena politicked his way to defeating the Nexus at that, I want to say it was SummerSlam match. It was either SummerSlam or Survivor Series. I think it was SummerSlam, where it was Team WWE versus the Nexus. You had a chance to make stars, brand new stars, and you failed. Not only did you fail, Edge and Chris Jericho, legends in this business, told Cena to his face, this is not right. You should not be doing this. We should not be doing this. Much to the point that when the match started, Edge and Jericho were just gone. They got eliminated quickly because they knew what it was hitting for. And John Cena not only won, he won in an embarrassing fashion, because after Justin Gabriel missed the 450 splash, Cena just pinned him. And then he just pinned Wade Barrett. Make it make sense. And the crazy thing is that after the match, Cena went to Edge and Jericho and said, you know what, you guys were right. I'm sorry. It doesn't matter. The Nexus never recovered after that. You wasted all of this momentum that they had. Wade Barrett should be world champion. Zack Ryder, oh radio, tell me everything you know. Zack Ryder did the unspeakable. He did the unthinkable in the WWE. He got himself over, creating his Long Island IZ channel, the internet championship. He got himself over, and the fans were behind him, much to the point that there was a segment on Raw where The Rock was in the ring, and they were chanting for Zack Ryder. That's how over he was. He was getting cheered over The Rock, and what did WWE do? What did this man do? They buried him. They had Cena beat him left and right. They had Kane destroy him. They had Cena take his girl and then stripped him of the championship. Doesn't make sense. Two recent ones are Shinsuke Nakamura and Kevin Owens. This comes from the recent feuds that they had and the world championships that they were going after. When it comes to Shinsuke Nakamura, he was feuding with Seth Rollins. Seth Rollins was establishing the World Heavyweight Championship. And if you wanted to go with Seth going into Mania as champion, that would have been great. But Shinsuke had switched to this new heel gimmick, and he was killing it. It was over. Shinsuke Nakamura has never been world champion. They failed to pull the trigger on him at WrestleMania when he won the Royal Rumble. They failed him on that one. They just failed him there. And then you could have had him beat Seth in that last man standing match. Mind you, Shinsuke dominated that match, and we were talking about Seth in that match being injured, and he had a bad back, so there was no way he should have won that match. And Shinsuke has not recovered since. Yeah, he won the US title, but nobody cares. Shinsuke could have beaten Seth, held the belt for 3-4 months. Seth could have taken time off. Shinsuke could have gotten to a couple feuds. Seth could have then came back and won the championship, and we could still go into WrestleMania. Traded to WrestleMania 40. On the other hand, KO and his feud with Cody Rhodes, KO wasn't lying. KO told the truth every single time. And yeah, you wanted to have Cody have a strong reign, but KO was over. You could have did the same. This was going on at the same time as the Shinsuke Seth Rollins feud. KO could have won the belt, especially in that ladder match, held the belt up until WrestleMania, so he could have had a 4.5 month reign. Cody could have gotten the belt back and still gone into WrestleMania. It just, like, it doesn't make sense. It just sucks. You know, oh no, sorry, KO was, this feud with KO, the KO feud wasn't during Shinsuke, it was during this previous year. So we're talking about Cody facing Cena at WrestleMania. But still, it just, you have to pivot. Then there's LA Knight, who this guy is super, super over. For some reason, WWE won't pull the trigger on. This is the time right now to make LA Knight world champion. This is the time. This is the time. I don't get it. Yeah, he was never going to beat Roman Reigns. I'm fine with that, but like now, Seth's world champion, Cody's world champion, LA Knight is over. What are you afraid of? Now I could talk about LOL TNA because that could be a whole show unto itself, but I'm gonna stick with 2 times. One, Bobby Roode at Bound for Glory. So this was the time when Hulk Hogan was in charge and Eric Bischoff was in charge, and there were some good times, there were some bad times, but it should have gotten better. So we're looking at Bound for Glory when he's taking on Kurt Angle. I believe this was Bound for Glory 2013 or 2011. It was 2011 in Philly, my hometown, baby. And we were doing it. We were doing it. Bobby Roode was being pushed. He was over. He was over. He was over. And they had Kurt Angle win the main event. That didn't make sense. When someone is over, you pull the trigger on them. I just don't get it. And the crazy thing is, they had him, I believe, win the title that week on Impact. Huh? What? Then Mike Santana this year with Mike Santana. So it's obvious that he's going to win the championship. It's obvious that he's going to be the new face of TNA, right? But why wait until Bound for Glory? Slammiversary, the celebration of your company, is right there. It's in his home state, close to his hometown, and all signs point to Mike Santana winning. And then just no. Huh? Make it make sense, ladies and gentlemen. Make it make sense. We know the end game, but it doesn't make it any better. But with all the failures, we do have successes. We have Tessa Blanchard becoming world champion in one of the most crazy, shocking moves in all of professional wrestling. Tessa Blanchard becoming world champion in TNA. Not women's world champion, the world champion. And it was a smart move to pivot. It was a smart move to go with the hot hand. Now, yes, the aftermath wasn't so great because, well, Tessa Blanchard is her own worst enemy, but it worked. Kofi Mania. It's crazy to think that this was supposed to be Mustafa Ali versus Daniel Bryan in WrestleMania, but Ali got hurt. Kofi replaced him, won the chamber. Vince doing Vince things. Now, yes, he was being super racist, but it kind of worked. And Kofi Mania was born. The New Day, his boys fighting for him, and then Kofi Kingston winning the WWE Championship from Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania. Kofi Mania was it. The outgoing feuds leading up to his title loss weren't that great. The Trouble in Paradise was just a finish. It just ended everything. And then we know how it ended with Brock Lesnar. How about sticking with Kofi Mania, his opponent, Daniel Bryan, and the Yes Movement? We know the history. We know the story. Starting in NXT, tried to make him seem less than, and it just wasn't going to work, ladies and gentlemen. It just wasn't going to work because people like me that know the business, that watch the business, that see these things, knows just how great Bryan Danielson, not Daniel Bryan. Bryan Danielson is. So first it was, winning the world title, defeating John Cena, SummerSlam in a fantastic match. But then it came with Randy Orton cashing in Money in the Bank and the Authority taking out Daniel Bryan, leading to the fans revolting. There was even a segment where we had all of the previous world champions in the ring as Cena and I think Randy were doing the unification. And we had, I'm talking Ray and Randy and Cena and Christian and Mark Henry and Kane. And we had all these former world champions. Daniel Bryan was in the ring. And as they're trying to do this segment, the fans are just chanting for Daniel Bryan. They're just chanting for, so much to the point that Mark Henry pulled Bryan forward, raised his arms so the crowd could acknowledge him. That's how over it was. And leading up into Daniel Bryan winning the championship at WrestleMania, Batista came back, won the Royal Rumble, got booed. Rey Mysterio got booed the previous year because Daniel Bryan wasn't even in the Rumble. And the WWE had to pivot and they had to pull the trigger, and the rest is history. Daniel Bryan defeats Triple H in the first match, wins the triple threat match in the last match. Absolutely great. And then there is the Acclaimed. This stems from them slowly building, slowly getting better, slowly getting over. And they were over, and they were feuding with Swerve and Our Glory for the tag team championship. And they had a banger of a tag team match at, I want to say, All Out. I think it was the best match on the card, and the fans were clamoring for the Acclaim to win. Now, this is one of the few times where you have to make an audible from the back. You have to make an audible from the back and say, yo, we got to put the belts on the Acclaim like right now. And they didn't do it. Swerve and Our Glory still won, but they finally did the pivot. In the next match, the Acclaimed won. Right. Then we have, most recently, Jey Uso. The man is just, he might be the most over person in all of professional wrestling. Over Ospreay, over Rhea, over Cody, over Cena, over Willow. Jey Uso is just the man. And if you watch WWE Unreal and caught a glimpse of the original call for WrestleMania 41, Jey Uso was going to be in a ladder match for the Intercontinental Championship. And they pivoted and saw how over Jey was. And yes, even though Gunther has back-to-back losses at WrestleMania, it's okay. Gunther will recover. Gunther will win that big one. But you had to go with Jey Uso winning. You just had to do it, ladies and gentlemen. You had no choice but to do it. And lastly, the man, Becky Lynch. This stems from the overabundance of Charlotte Flair and constantly pushing Charlotte Flair over other wrestlers. Becky was the inaugural SmackDown Women's Champion and was doing well, right? Carmella won the first Women's Money in the Bank, cashed in. Carmella was also over, and they pulled the trigger on her. So we were going with Carmella versus Becky at SummerSlam. I was perfectly fine with that match, right? Charlotte Flair had just come back from one of her many injuries, and Paige, the GM at the time, said, listen, if you win this match, if you beat Carmella, we'll add you to the title match at SummerSlam. That made no sense. She didn't earn anything. She not only entered the match, she won the match, and the fans turned. Oh my God, I haven't heard booing like that in a long time. Becky turned heel. Then they had to try to do the whole Becky was angry at the fans. And it wasn't working because the fans knew Becky got screwed. They knew Carmella got screwed. Becky had to turn face, and we got the man. And then we got the lead up to everything with, her feud with Ronda, the Nia Jax punch, that iconic picture of Becky in the stance with the bloody nose, and the rest is history, and the man has been born. And you pivot because now Becky's the top star in all of women's wrestling. Yes, over Rhea, over Naomi, over Mercedes, Becky Lynch is the star. She can take time off and still come back, and she's still the biggest star of professional wrestling and women's wrestling. So there have been successes, and there will be many, many more when we go back to the list of the next big thing. Stephanie Vaquero, Mike Santana, Ilya Dragunov, Chris Statlander, Willow Nightingale. They are up next. I wholeheartedly believe that. It's okay. It's okay sometimes to not pivot for the very obvious reason, like Santino Marella. You know what I mean? But then there are other times where you have to pivot. But that is our show, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. It's been a wild, crazy ride. Look on the screen what we got coming up. Forbidden Door is coming up. Oh, with a great card. Check out the socials, Charismatic Creations on Facebook and YouTube, Charismatic_Creations52 on Instagram, and of course the 215 on Twitter. And as always, Anna J, Chris Statlander, Willow Nightingale, Priscilla Kelly, Isla Dawn, and Bailey. Holla at your boy. Peace.